Lina, very warm welcome to our museum and to this historic lecture hall. It's so great to have you here. And you already had a very exciting morning in which we discussed a lot about the future permanent display and your vision for it. So it's wonderful that we have some time for a conversation to speak about our joint modernization project, of which we are all very excited of. So I wanted to ask you a first question. So what motivated you and what fascinated you about this modernization project?
Thank you so much, Barbara. I'm so happy to be here, and it's been really thrilling to discuss together how we can design this permanent collection and renovate the museum. And it's really such an amazing place here. I mean, I really love the craft that we can see with the wood, and that history is so meaningful, because once you enter those places, you see the work of the hand, and that's very meaningful for me as an architect. But also being interested in the MARKK, both because of its situation, the history it reflects on, and its location in Hamburg, and the history of Hamburg as a portuary city, the relationship to the world, how it brings the world into that institution. But honestly, one of the things that really interests me in this museum is you, Barbara.
Oh, thank you.
Because you have been really leading a great vision for this building, and looking at how today we talk about a collection that is coming from different origins, how we, how do we decolonize those institutions, and a very forward-looking approach to this museum, which has also a fantastic collection. Mm-hmm. So this is a great journey, I feel, and very meaningful one that really motivates me into that project. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yes, and we felt from the first moment that you understand what we aim to, because for us it's a huge challenge. Yes, to work with this history, the colonial history that is inscribed in the building and in the collections. But then nevertheless to use this collection and use this building to make people aware about the wealth, the cultural wealth of the world, and the quality of art that we house here, and how relevant it is to interact with people and descendant communities, to kind of create a new space, a new future for our kind of museums in our society.
Yeah, and there's a very strong human aspect to that, like understanding humanity, understanding how history is, and bringing people at the heart of the discourse, and the more of active approach to museums that I think is very relevant and very forward-looking in a way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, we are so happy, and because we have this idea to create a new kind of museum space, and we feel that you and your team perfectly understood that, and so it's a perfect match.
Super.
I have to say.
We're so excited.
Yeah. So, what do you see as the biggest challenge in this project?
I think one of the challenges that we may face, we already know the building is very present. It has, it's a building that expresses power as well. So it has a dehumanizing effect also in the way it sits in its context. And today is not very visible as well. It's kind of contradictory, because as you approach this building, you feel it has very much of a presence, but yet it's somehow like a vessel from the past, and it's disconnected from its neighborhood. So the question is, how do you bring it into contemporaneity, allow it to be present for the neighborhood, for its context, and yet also open it as a structure, allow it to be more human, and allow it to become more porous, there are purely sometimes technical aspects related to this building, like disabled accessibility.
Absolutely,
You know, you have staircases, you cannot access, or even access to an elderly generation. So all this is a challenge actually to the building structure itself, and means also that we have to rethink the flow, rethink how we access this building, how also it becomes more porous, how like sometimes an intricate and may be felt as a heavy history can become contemporary, can bring, can be looked at in a much more fresh eye and much more future-looking approach.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely, because I think it needs both space in front. The forecourt is very relevant, that we integrate it somehow for the public to approach the building, because it's so hidden, and that's something that we always envision, that people enter the building and it doesn't feel so dark, so heavy, but that it is a light contemporary space that they enter, because that's also our vision for this institution, that it is a museum of the future, not just of the past.
And I think light plays an important role, and it's about measuring the light, because I think at that time also we see in terms of the heritage of the building, there's a light that is more dim and more dramatic, which is also interesting. So we have to find the right balance of how much, you know, how much you bring light and what light means actually when it's brought into the building. And as you mentioned, like the forecourt, like the perspective outside in, and what can happen on this plaza that becomes more of a landscaped area, close to, you know, bringing people to enjoy nature, but also to enjoy maybe installations that talk about what's going to happen inside the museum. So making it more active and making the building more urban, more related to its surrounding in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
But one thing that I also loved is when I entered into this building, the first visit that I had of the whole site was this amazing hall. You know, it's so beautiful. Also, I mean, it's dark, but it's also the material. You know, the marbles, all the gilding, and it's a beautiful space, and the glass work. So again, this artisanal and craftsmanship that is present there, and that is waiting to be revealed. And this is all the work that we will also carry on to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. You spoke already a little bit about it, but of your first impression when you entered the building. But what particularly inspires you about the building, and what did you see in it when you first got to know it and explored it?
Yeah. Once you go into the entrance and then you start looking at all the spaces and the exhibition spaces, I feel like the typology of the exhibition rooms is very interesting. It's this kind of colonnade structure with the waffled ceiling, and it's really interesting because once we started looking at the history of Hamburg as a portuary city, at warehouses also, because there's a lot of transport of objects and of course of merchandise historically in this amazing city. A lot of the warehouses had the very similar typology. So it's both a building that has this intricacy of a very well decorated or well finished structure, but also that holds in it the history of Hamburg itself through those exhibition spaces that talk about those warehouses. So there are intersecting histories here that are very interesting to explore. And hence came here the idea of transport and travel, and the question of where the collection came from, and how through the exhibitions we can also talk about that history and anchor that building in the history of Hamburg, but also the history of Hamburg as a portuary city where a lot of flow from different countries came in, and also what did actually the city itself, or even on a larger map, the country itself had as impact and as historical events related to the outer world. So, and I think sometimes architecture and most of our work is about how architecture can narrate those stories, can allow you to not only experience an exhibition but also understand and learn about the place where you are in.
Yeah, because it was so fascinating when you first showed that, because I think, I mean, we know that our collections relate to this trade history, obviously. We have the names of these big companies engraved in the pillars in the entrance hall. But we were not so aware that also the architecture reflected that. And only when you showed this relationship to these warehouses, we realized that actually the architecture of this building really reflects that aesthetic. And it was really eye-opening, because we never thought about it this way. And so that was really exciting. And so it blends in exactly in what we want to do also in our permanent display, to kind of really reflect this connected history and this really deep connections of our collection with this city. So it's it was really a surprise, because I've never thought about that. And
it also blends within the same building, both the formal and the less formal, let's say, or the authoritarian type of architecture, but yet the very mundane, actually, type of architecture, and the mix of both is really interesting to explore in this experience of what a museum could be, and how we exhibit in such a structure.
So, how? Now we spoke a lot about, you know, of the building and its history and what it means today. So what kind of visitor experience are you envisioning for the future? What is your idea how people would feel and explore and experience this place also emotionally in the future when you're finished?
I hope they'll be very transported and happy in this space, of course. But this is something that we've been discussing this morning, actually, and it's really for me, it's important that you enter into the museum, get into the collection, and understand, have a shift in perspective first, like have a shift in perspective that is echoing also the way you're shifting your reading of the objects themselves, and in the way also you are critically reassessing how the history of those objects and our maybe cliches of understanding of certain territories. So the space has to also allow you that shift of perspective in the way we display objects and the way we experience our relationship to objects as well. And one of the things that we were discussing this morning is how the human become also part of the exhibition, not only like a viewer, basically, but active in the relationship to the objects. So you're really there, you're really connected differently to the objects. For example, sitting here and I have an object next to me, like just to like provoke a certain situation. So I'm in a dialogue also to this object that is sitting next to me. So the spatial configuration is able to allow you that very different way of looking at the collection and instilling like dialogue and conversation. And also working on those variety of experiences, that it's not like a dull experience or like parcours, promenade inside the museum, but it has pictures, it has experiences that are unfolding, and that's something very important in museums that we are also working on a larger scale in different contexts as well.
Yeah, because we are really in a shifting moment of rethinking the institution museums, and many museums engage in that. You addressed the V&A storage building, and we went to see it as well and had a long conversation with its director lately. And so it is, we are in a really in a moment in which these institutions change, and it's more, as you say, it's a focus not just on the objects or the art, but it's also on the people and how do they experience these spaces. And so it will be really exciting to develop a new way of also doing a permanent collection with that perspective.
And about that, I feel like also museums more and more have to play a very crucial role in the world, and more specifically related to cultural diplomacy and bridging people together. I mean, we are in a world where we see more divide. We are living a transformation of digital transformation. AI will be faced with real news or fake news. So how do you counter that divide that may happen between populations, between cultures, and allow places to be places where people meet, where they understand the other, and where they become places of intersection. So in that sense, the museum institution plays an important role, and a very central one. And they, more and more we have to push that museums are not perceived as elitist places where you just go to learn about something in the past, but they're actual contemporary places of conversation as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we are all very excited and looking forward what comes out of it, and we really would like to speed up the process that we could live in this museum already, but there's a couple of years ahead. But we had a great start, and we're very excited to continue.
We are as well.
So thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you so much,
That really keep up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Very excited as well.